everybody. By way of background, I'm from Beaver County. I grew up in Ohioville and went to Western Beaver High School. There you go. Class of 77. And some people may, probably everybody here knows this. Lewis doesn't. That what did they call us in the Western Beaver High School? What was our mascot? The Golden Beavers. Who came up with this idea? My dad was the president of the board when they first started Western Beaver. That was his idea. Now, the Golden Beavers. Could you imagine having that as a mascot? Anyway, it was tough. But my dad, so I moved from here and moved to St. Louis. But my dad lived here all these years in Wright Township. And everybody I knew when I was growing up was Democrat. I didn't know that there was a Republican out there. And through the years, like I think during the Reagan years, everybody, as far as I know, that lived back here also flipped to Republican. And the Democratic Party that's left is not anything that anybody, the Democrat in the old days, would even recognize anymore. It's they hate Americans, they hate America, they hate everything it stands for. Mark's going to tell you about what happened to us, but I just want to thank you for coming out and supporting us. And there's a lot more to this story than you've heard in the press, and most of the stuff you see there is not accurate at all. So thanks again.
Hello, New Hampshire. Well, I'm not Joe Biden. I actually know where I am. Okay. McCloskeys says, I'm Mark McCloskey. We've been here many times since we've been married 36 years now. And I've been up in this neighborhood a lot because, like she said, her family lived here. Her dad just passed away this last January. And after his funeral, I think the only place would serve us a drink was here in Bridgewater. Something called Spanky D's, maybe something like that. All right. So anyway, until today, that was my last visit to Bridgewater, okay? So how many of us own guns, right? How many of us think that we will be owning guns if Robert Francis O'Rourke becomes the gun czar of the United States? Okay? That's what's at stake in this election, all right? I always start with the Declaration of Independence, you know. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I forgot my second Biden joke yesterday when I was doing this, and that is, you know, the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be, and that, well, you know the thing. Obviously, Joe Biden does not know the thing. And the reason why Joe Biden doesn't care about the thing is he does not hold that thing to be precious and significant, right?
Come on. Right.
Come
on.
And when the founding fathers put those rights down in writing in the Declaration and in the Constitution, they weren't giving us rights. They were acknowledging the rights that we were born with as human beings.
Right.
Human beings made in the image of God and endowed with certain rights, including the right to life, the right to live free, and the right to pursue our lives as we see fit without interference from the government. The government in this country doesn't give us rights. We give the government some privileges to the extent that we take control of ourselves through things like re-electing Donald Trump and not letting Joe Biden, or as we now know, the Harris-Biden administration.
Yeah. That's right. That's it.
So how do we fit in this little thing? I was just, you know, kind of a small town, you know, lawyer trying to grill Sunday night dinner, and you know, as the meme says, they should have just let me grill, okay? But let me give a little background. When the riots started, allegedly in response to George Floyd's death, St. Louis went up in flames, just like a lot of different places. St. Louis is a small town surrounded by a bigger community, but the city of St. Louis is only 300,000 people, about 50-50 black and white. Most of downtown is semi-abandoned, although, you know, there's some new thriving industries, mostly sports related, but a lot of the city is just ghetto. It's just abandoned properties and burned out buildings. But there's also a really beautiful park called Forest Park, approximately twice the size of Central Park in New York City. And surrounding that are a bunch of really nice neighborhoods that were built at the beginning of the last century by the industrial elite of the West when St. Louis was the edge of the wilderness. Okay. Really nice places. However, 4 blocks north is abject ghetto. Okay. But on June the 1st and June the 2nd of this year, the peaceful mob that is to say the rioters, started burning stuff in downtown St. Louis. 4 police officers were shot. 1 retired police captain, David Dorn, was murdered. We watched the 7-Eleven downtown, Penny and I, from our bedroom on a satellite, on a feed from a helicopter, from the first brick. Now this 7-Eleven is 2 blocks from police headquarters in St. Louis. Okay. First brick goes through the windows get broken out, the crowd comes in, loots the store empty, then somebody sets fire to it. We watch it catch on fire, then become engulfed in flames, and the roofs start to settle in. 30, 40 minutes we're watching this take place. How many cops showed up? 0. How many firemen showed up? 0. Just like what happened in Compton, California this week, the mob formed a ring around and laid on the street and wouldn't let the emergency vehicles in. We look at each other and we say, you know, holy crap, when the fit hits the shan, you're all absolutely alone out there. You cannot depend on anybody else. And I'll digress here because this is really more of a Second Amendment thing than I usually do. But that's when we realized that that's why the Second Amendment exists. Because even if you've got the best police department in the world, they're not standing next to you all the time. There will be times when you're going to have to defend yourself. We were down doing a presentation in Dallas, Texas a couple of weeks ago with Colonel Allen West, and the guy standing to my left was the sheriff of Denton County. And when he got up, he said exactly that. He says, no matter, you reelect me as your sheriff, I'll do everything I can to protect you, but I'm not always standing right next to you, and you're going to have to take care of yourself from time to time, and that's why you need to own a gun and learn how to use it. At which point I looked over at him, I said, now, Mr. Sheriff, sir, have you ever seen a worse example of gun handling than Mrs. McCloskey? And he says, can't say that I have. Anyway, so put this in context. It's now June, and between where our house is and downtown is an area called the Central West End of St. Louis, which is nice shops and boutiques and restaurants and those sorts of things, at least used to be. And a block beyond that is where my office building is, which is a 3-story Victorian house that was built in the 1880s, which we restored as our office. That whole West End area, by the 3rd week in June, had been boarded up. The pharmacy around the corner from my office that we use was boarded up. I talked to the owner, and I said, what happened? He said, well, the alarm went off. I said, you come back here to see what's going on? He said, no, I didn't want to get killed. But they had tried to roll up steel doors. He says the rioters were in his pharmacy for 6 hours after the alarm started going off. The police showed up after 10 hours. Okay? That was the first of 3 times he got burglarized. He's still boarded up. But you drove through the West End in those days, all the buildings were boarded up. Maybe 70 or 80% of them either already had the windows broken out or were boarded in preparation for it. So we had some legitimate reasons to be concerned. Then we get the entity that's planning these riots is called Expect Us. It's our local version of the Black Lives Matter anarchists and communists. And it's run by 2 upstanding American citizens, one named Cori Bush, which I'll get back to in a minute, and another named Rashid Aldridge. And Expect Us advertises their riots ahead of time. They post posters. And they expressly say they do not like the term peaceful protest. They have no intention of being peaceful. They want to shake things up. They want to make it as unpleasant and as distasteful for people as possible. And they want to be in your face and in the community, not their community, but the non-ghetto community, and do as much shaking up as they can. They expressly disclaim the concept of peaceful protest. So they put out a flyer saying they're going to come and hit our neighborhood on the Friday before the 28th, and then it doesn't happen. So, but in light of that, planning for it, because we spent 32 years rebuilding that house and filling it full of kind of nice stuff, there's some things we didn't want to see burned, okay? And we didn't want to get killed either because we kind of like staying alive. And so we staged fire extinguishers all around the house and some weapons. And riot didn't happen on Friday, so we went out to our country place, came back in Sunday afternoon. Our daughter was coming into town to have dinner with us, and so she is going to go to the grocery store that's across the street from our house. Our house sits in this private neighborhood, different than a lot of other places in the country, because when St. Louis was formed out in the wilderness, private citizens would buy chunks of it, fenced it off, and they own everything. I mean, the streets, the sidewalks, the utilities, everything. These are 100% private property. The whole neighborhood no different than the inside of your own house, as far as the law goes. And it's gated with wrought iron gates, and they've been there since 1888. Okay? Big signs that say private property, no trespassing, private neighborhood, residents only, that kind of stuff. Unmistakable, right? And if you live in the city of St. Louis, you know what a private place is, even if you're an anarchist. But when I just got off the cell phone with my daughter and asked her to pick this stuff up over at the grocery store, we started hearing the mob form. This is now Sunday afternoon about 6. And so I walk out of the house, go up to the gate on Kings Highway, and open it up, step out on the Kings Highway, look down towards the grocery store, and I see hundreds of people now milling around out in front of the grocery store. So I got my daughter on the phone. I say, are you stuck in that, or did you already get the stuff and get out? And she said, I got out. I'm on the other side of it. I'll be there in a few minutes. Right? The reason I digress to that is the media, even to this day, still says, well, we've seen pictures of that gate torn down, but do we really know when it got torn down? And then there's all kinds of video on the media of a guy holding half of the gate open in peace and people walking through. Those are like the first 5 people, all right? The other half of the gates are batwing type gates. One side is staked into the ground with a padlock on it so it cannot open. Almost by maybe the 10th or 15th person of the 300 to 500 that came through, the other side of the gate was broken all the way to the ground and people were stumbling over themselves to come in. But I got ahead of myself. My daughter comes to the house. Patty and I are out in the east patio. We mix up a pitcher of Bellinis, getting ready to have a Sunday afternoon picnic. I put some meat on the grill, and all of a sudden the noise starts to surge, and then it recedes, and I think, oh great, they're going the other direction, all right? But then it starts to build up again. Now the road beyond our house is about 100 feet wide. There's 6 lanes of traffic with a grassy section, sidewalks, and then walls on both sides. Maybe 100, 120 feet from side to side. All of a sudden we start seeing some stragglers at the front of the crowd coming past our gate. And we realize 2 things. One is the police have closed down Kings Highway to allow the riot to go down Kings Highway. Second, there are no police on our gate. We've got 1 private security guard on our street, and he's nowhere to be found. And faster than you could respond to it, all of a sudden the entire street from side to side, 120 feet wide, fills with this mob of people screaming, shouting, banging on drums, flailing. And they're coming past there's a pedestrian gate, big driving gate, second pedestrian gate. And as they come up, look over at Patty and we say, God, I hope they don't try to come here. All of a sudden then, this gate flings open and the other half breaks down. Like everybody in the Western Hemisphere starts pulling through. The first thing I do is I step out in the wing block that sticks out past the rest of the patio, and I step up on that and I say, get out, private property. Those 2 words, that phrase, private property, inflamed them. You know, it's just antithetical to everything they believe in, because these are, make no mistake, these are Marxists, these are terrorists, these are anarchists. They are opposed to the concept of private property. Their slogan is invade and occupy, okay? So when I said private property, all of a sudden they started coming in more aggressively. Well, Patty went in the house, called 911. I stepped onto the other side of the door, go in the house and grab my AR-15. And I come out now on the wing of the porch with my AR, and what do you think the average, somewhat intelligent human being would normally do when they see kind of a deranged guy with a rifle out in his porch shouting at him, private property, get the hell out of my neighborhood? The average intelligent person might back up or think something about it, right? They did not. They kept storming forward. And I assumed that Patty and her daughter had gone in the house to call 911, and they had. But then all of a sudden I see Patty show up in front of me on the other side of our hedge, about as close to me as this lady is here, with this dumbass little Bryco pistol in her hand, waving it around, okay? Now, 2 things about Patty. She doesn't know squat about guns, but she also knows that Bryco did not work because it had been a prop gun we'd used in a lawsuit up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So she's out there, and, you know, come to find out later, she shouldn't like talking to the public as much as I do, but that she knew that from where I was standing on the porch, I couldn't see the other 2/3 of our front yard and couldn't protect the front doors of the house. Our house has got glass front doors. They could break them in and come into the house and kill us and burn down the house and all that kind of stuff. So she likes to go out there and now standing in front of me with a gun that I know that doesn't work and she knows it doesn't work, with 300 to 500 people out there screaming at her and threatening our lives and threatening to burn down the house. And that's the room I'm going to be in. That's my bedroom. That's going to be where I take my shower. That's going to be where I have dinner after I kill you and kill your little dog. And insulting every aspect of her female anatomy and her personality and her chastity and all the other things, every possible crude thing you can possibly imagine. And once again, looking just crazy and an insane mob. But now I don't have a clean line of fire, right? Because she's between me and the crowd, and if something happens to her, and I try to fire into the crowd, I might hit her and kind of like her and didn't want to have to kill her by mistake. So I have to come out in the front yard now. And so now we end up both on the front patio of the house, and she's still got that pistol. And by the way, we have these souvenir cards you can have. But if you look at it closely, you'll see two things in this picture. One is you'll see that the selector switch on my AR is in the fire position. And the other is you'll see that her finger's not on the trigger, it's inside the trigger guard, but pressed up against the front of it, contrary to what everybody says. At some point, the crowd decides that we aren't being intimidated enough to give this issue. And they got, contrary once again to this concept of peaceful protesters, they've got folks wearing body armor and carrying pistols, right? And this one guy who's wearing camo-colored body armor has got ammo pouches. He reaches in with both his hands, pulls out 2 loaded magazines, points the open ends of them at me so I can see they've got loaded shells in them, clicks them together and says, "You're next." Okay. The guy standing next to him is wearing Desert Shield type body armor and light color stuff. And he turned around at one point and it says Human Shield on the back, but he's carrying a sidearm and he's getting more and more intimidating, and he's got this full face covering, the total Antifa stuff where you can see the slit of his eyes, and the black thing over his head, and he keeps inching forward and inching forward and inching forward. You've probably seen on TV a photograph where I'm leaning over like this talking to Patty. And what I'm saying to her is, if that guy comes another foot forward, I'm going to have to kill him, right? And Patty says to me, "You're not killing anybody today." And I didn't. Not a shot was fired. The crowd moved on eventually. Not even spray painted, other than the gate that they broke down to get in. No, not even any property damage to speak of. Then they go down to the mayor's house. Now, the press is as honest as you can possibly believe, right? The press has always reported this as a peaceful protest walking past our house on the way to the mayor's house. Well, the mayor doesn't live on our street. The mayor doesn't live in our neighborhood. The mayor lives 2 blocks north of our neighborhood and a half a mile west of our neighborhood. If you came into our neighborhood to get to the mayor, you have to break down our gate to get in and have to break down the gate on the other end to get out, right? But they eventually make it to the mayor's house, and now they're throwing Molotov cocktails at our house and shooting fireworks through her windows. And an NBC affiliate, female reporters there with her armed security, right? The embedded media is so sure this is a peaceful protest that they have armed security traveling with them. But one of the protesters produces an AK-47 and starts to challenge the NBC lady. Her guard unholsters his pistol. We're going to have a firefight there right in front of the mayor's house. And then the NBC affiliate decides that they're going to hightail it out of there. So that's how nonviolent it was that night. So we're happy to have survived that, but what most people don't know, that was the tip of the iceberg. Okay? And I go on too long, but I think it's important for everybody to understand how dangerous these Antifa people are, and how dangerous the BLM movement is. We represent a lot of African American clients, and with the exception of one, even that same night, I went over to the office to board it up after all this, and I was getting calls at the office till after 2 o'clock in the morning from our African American clients telling us how much they loved us and don't let the press skew this story and all that kind of stuff. But then the following Tuesday, one of them, who we'd represented for a long time, very nice young lady, we'd represented her in a couple of car accidents, we'd represented a bunch of her family members. She became a really good friend of ours. Her husband, after he got out of the military, was a St. Louis City policeman who then committed suicide. I think Patty and I were the only Caucasians at his funeral. She was the only Caucasian of this lady's graduation from high school and graduation from college. we all went to her sister's graduation college. These are real good close friends of ours. She calls up and says to Patty, I can't believe what you've done. She says, I love you folks, but there's no curing this. We're going to come back. She's part of the Expect Us movement, part of this BLM organization. And she says, we're coming back on Friday. We're going to kill you and burn the house, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it, right? And on the phone with Patty for an hour and a half and telling her about how this is unacceptable. At some point, Patty says what we've been saying during the 32 years we lived in St. Louis. What about all the hundreds of black people every year that are murdered in the city of St. Louis that nobody cares about? And she says, you can't link those things. That's racist. You can't talk about black on black crime in the same sentence as talking about Black Lives Matter. That's off limits. You cannot say, I got angry about that. And then finally she says, well, maybe if you and I stand out in front of your house this Friday and hand out water bottles to the protesters when they come in next time, maybe that'll work. She says, no, we're still going to kill you, and we're still going to burn your house down. So now it's like Wednesday morning, and I start calling for security. From time to time, we use secondary employment police for security, and so we call up the people we normally contact. Nobody wants to get involved because they don't want the bad press. They direct me to this entity in a town outside of St. Louis that does corporate security internationally, a bunch of special forces guys, good reputation. Well, I talked to them. They'd gotten some negative publicity during the Ferguson riots and didn't want the negative press, so they refused to do it. They referred me back to secondary employment police. I said, I've just been there, okay? Nobody in St. Louis will touch it. So we come back to him. Now it's Wednesday afternoon, and we've been, since we got off the phone with our client, been secreting valuables and taking paintings off the wall and hiding stuff every place we can, and had not slept since that Sunday night. We have, finally we get back in touch with the corporate security entity, and the owner of it says, well, if I were you, I'd just take whatever you can take in your car. The most important thing is you just walk away from the house and forget about it. It's history. And I said, that's something we ain't going to do, okay? We're going to go down to the count if we have to. We're not going to abandon this house. We spent 32 years here, huge amount of personal effort, and we're just not going to forfeit this house to the mob. Earlier that week, I'd gotten a call from the White House, and one of the gentlemen at the White House staff had told me that the president wanted to send you his support, and if there's ever anything we can do for you, let us know. So I called him back up, and I said, well, now, you said if there's ever anything you can do, well, right now we need it done, and we need it done too sweet. So he gave me Mark Meadows' cell phone number, and I called up Mark Meadows, and that started getting some balls rolling in D.C. Next call I made was to Tucker Carlson, okay? And I'm sitting on the bench in the kitchen, Patty's sitting next to me, and I've been on Tucker a couple of times already by then, and he can hear Patty sobbing in the background. I'm telling the story I just told you about trying to get security. And he goes on the air that night with that story and, tells basically the world that I'm terrified, Patty's sobbing in the background, we can't get any security. Okay? Well, I'll tell you what, by that next night, by that Friday, we had Navy SEALs. Okay? I had about a dozen secondary employment cops from rural jurisdictions that weren't afraid to get dirty if they had to. We had the FBI helicopter circling the top of the house. We had a lot of federal support, which I can't really talk too much about, but I'll say this. Jim, the SEAL, who is my personal security, was scoping the high-rises around the house, and at some point, somebody scopes them back. And all of a sudden, they panic and jump on you and all that kind of stuff. Then his radio goes off. Turns out that was an FBI sniper who was protecting us. But anyway, despite the fact that the city police had been told to stand down, we've got a private army there now, and the chief of police himself, a guy named John Hayden, is a very good policeman, a very good chief of police, but handcuffed by the local government, shows up in front of the house and meets with my SEAL team and meets with my secondary cops, and they organize a plan, basically to show a big show of force, but not of weapons. So all the guys put their rifles down, were behind things, but stood out there, and they were fairly impressive looking guys, even without weapons, okay? And the chief himself stayed there almost the whole night. I mean, we didn't get all clear until 4 o'clock in the morning. And every time the crowd, which was now estimated by the FBI to be 500 or 1,000, would surge up against our now heavily reinforced gates, the chief himself would go up to the gate and talk them down. People would try to climb over, and he'd go up there and himself talk it down. And we wrote him a nice letter saying, above and beyond the call of duty, and we wish that the city would support the police the way the police were supporting us. They just absolutely won't do it. We had to call out security again, 4 days ago, when Expect Us issued a new flyer saying that they were going to come and attack our neighborhood again. Okay. Fortunately, they went a different direction. But once again, all these things are A, they're not free. B, it takes some time to get people set up. My closest security people take about 20 minutes to get to my house, and these folks can burn me out in 5 minutes. Okay, and that gets back around to what we're here about today, which is the Second Amendment, and that is I've grown up around guns, and I've been throughout my whole life fairly well armed. Patty has always relied on me.
We didn't lock our doors.
Yeah, out here in western Pennsylvania, you probably don't have a lot of riots all the time, but the city of St. Louis has always been a dangerous place. How dangerous is the city of St. Louis? City of St. Louis, like I said earlier, it's only about 300,000 people. As of when I checked the crime statistics yesterday morning, 196 murders in the city of St. Louis so far this year. Almost all of them African-American fatalities. Almost all of them African-American offenders, right? Although in the real world, almost all of them unapprehended. I've never understood why nobody cares about that. However, we had Rudy Giuliani and Bernie Kerik in the House for 2 days last week doing his podcast and doing some live broadcasts, and we were comparing notes. As of right now in New York City, there have been 280 murders out of 8,400,000 residents. That means the murder rate in St. Louis is more than 20 times